How shall I order my life? While the strong do what they will, the weak will suffer what they must. A candlelit banquet hall of white shimmering granite hewn 1,000 years prior. Families feasting in a newfound consummatory peace. Eyes of wondering Paris to the most striking woman wondering. Glancing, finding, keeping. Their appetite seeking a richer feast, setting the universe aflame. She, the prize of Spartan King Menelaus. He, the youngest found son of King Priam, filling with rapturous desire, birthing unthinkably epic tragedy. Stolen in the Trojan ship, she slips away. Kingly prize seized by prince's lips. Menelaus' most powerful brother, King Mycenae, lord of all the Bronze Age Greeks. Men, ever searching for war, now find action most disrespecting. The kings mobilize the greatest army ever seen at their port on the Aegean Sea, selling their 1,000+ navy fleet to embark. Westward, sailing sets sight. Blue sky with golden sun contrasting the unnaturally darkened sea. Wind-whipped waves cresting supernatural over the toy ships, howling across the seascaped hillside. Artemisian altar aflame, seeking her favor. Agamemnonian warriors prevent it from roaring. Gusts, tides prevalent, and ominous storming. Agamemnon, king of Greeks, king of kings. Artemis, Diana, in her Roman manifestation, is still angry for his boasting as a superior hunter to the goddess. Yet, how will he amend? The seer Calchas works to appease the ward goddess with the blood of peaceful doves, yet is a feast that cannot fully please. She is desiring a proper, noble blood over peace beasts. Utmost conquest requires utmost blood. He, son of cursed father Atreus, born by a Cretan mother, having 3 kingly daughters, one most beloved. The Grecian father, less so his daughter choosing, makes a hurried vow to lure his wife and Iphigenia to Aulis, using mediators Odysseus and Diomedes to tell and restrain his wife Clytemnestra, to send his daughter so that she might wed the great half-god Achilles. Achilles supposedly wished for them to be married before they left to fight against Troy. It was a royal lie. Iphigenia, arriving in her wedding pomp, ascends the hill with her father. Perched atop, she finds an unexpected altar and priest. Steel blade instead of steel ring. Death instead of that eternal circle. Momentary struggle succumbing to her willing slaughter. In Jephthah's disgrace, the father strikes down his very prodigy. Jephthah's daughter, never even named, yet given 2 months to mourn and return prior. But this child of the King of Kings, given in only a moment. And so you have an innocent lamb on Diana's altar of war, the place where crimson floods the continents. She sacrificed to Artemis, making way for the great crossing. The innocent beloved given up for the lesser moment of victory. His most loved sacrifice for what he most desired, greatest revenge ceding to greatest beauty, Helen of Troy's fleeing. You see, you too will be sacrificed by the clock hand of time, for time shall both be the hand of your executioner and your corpse's grave-bound carriage. All of your prior moments sacrificed to your very present. We self-curse reality by making rash vows. This is the same fate as marrying from the basis of lust, fighting as a mercenary, or choosing the lesser over the greater, the fate of we who bastardize love itself. What could love be, after all, but the demonstration of free will in the positive direction? Iphigenian submission to the Father King to save? Both. Willingly and under duress? Both. Love, if worth having, must involve risk to oneself? Both. Even more, risk of one's very self, if it is to be true love? Both. And herein lies the very paradox of both. Vulnerable is love. Strongest love, most vulnerable. Only love, born out of free will, may bestow true love. Love without freedom becomes infatuation by the enslaver. Sick lust, torturing the beloved, in Lewis's words. Only free will makes love worth living. True love stands alive, alone, along, with courage, honor, grace, and hope, outside the natural, making itself by definition supernatural and above. Free will is the gift that alone makes evil and hatred possible. A man who hates his neighbor from the annoyance of his personality is more evil than a man who slaughters his neighbor for stealing his juvenile daughter. The neighbor who is annoyed is unjust, but the man who is wronged is justified in his loathing and even in his retribution. Both wills are at play, both feelings optional. This is part what it means to be the moral animal, the only moral animal. The man who can never become evil is just a patsy, while a man who overcomes the desire for evil to do good fills the world with beauty. You see, humanity dictates optionality. Optionality requires freedom. Your opinion and your option to make rash vows like Agamemnon are those which prove the breadth of your humanity from fictitiously true Homer's bowels. Our whims are akin to the wind blowing wherever it pleases. When your pride is at most risk, you make your rashest vows to the gods. The more tailored the god, the more tailored you are to obey its whims. Like a fine suit, we men love to craft the perfect god to ourselves fit. Inventing gods, our timeless passion. Comprehension of free nature's power, according to Ella Wheeler Wilcox. You will be what you will to be. The will masters time and it conquers space. Your will guides your very becoming, forms your being, crafts as a self-made pottery. It is your will that creates, destroys, then recreates. Its very manifestation through purposeful value destruction. Potter and pottery unified. The creator with the created. The will takes on the higher and in a sense transcends itself. The will overcomes time and space. You see, that which overcomes time is eternal by necessity. He who needs not traverse space needs not time. And strikingly, the ability for time and space to be mastered means they subserviate to the will's power. The dimensionality of the personality of the will becomes greater than just the embodied man, for man is in himself only 3 1/2 dimensions, width, the depth, and the height at our fingertips. But time is beyond our grasp. You see, time is only a half-dimensional to the embodied man. We have lost yesterday. We only have hope for tomorrow, and so we only possess the present. That is the very definition of our embodiment, in one sense. Mankind builds majestic structures, writes flowing lyrics, develops world-class dominions to outlive him, and all, in a certain way, to overcome his time granted. But in another sense, he knows it's fleeting. Man's futile plans, no matter how effectively executed and redundant, will not stand. Like the Roman Colosseum, constructed grandeur must also fade. This, the very definition of the material. Then Wilcox continues to intuit the human will, that force unseen, the offspring of the deathless soul, can hew the way to any goal, though walls of granite intervene. It is not that the will dominating the material world is the vehicle for efficacy. Rather, it is that the will itself is the daughter of the eternal. Perhaps the will is something like Achilles, half material and half of the gods. Perhaps it is something more. What possibly could it be? The assertion here is that the soul is forever. Given that the will is the daughter of the soul, it too takes on heredity. Given the soul cannot be killed, it is now possible the will of that soul cannot be killed either. It's dependent on the strength of the Iphigenian father of that will. The risk of the will now lies in the quality of the seed. And something which cannot be killed is dangerous. That which cannot lose, destined only to overcome. The infinite endures inescapably. There are only two things which are more ominous in all of creation. The lesser of these two omini is the thing that believes it cannot die and therefore has lost fear over the most feared, death. It will act boldly. It will take risks, disregarding consequence. It will risk itself repeatedly, partly in proof of its deathlessness to both itself and to others. Proving itself through repetition, it gains confidence and takes more leverage in its risk profiling. This is the tragedy of the greatest prosecutor of the story of Agamemnon and Achilles, Alexander the Great. The conqueror of the world carried a version of Homer into his battles with the vision of surmounting the very glory of Achilles himself. Watch my videos on Alexander for more detail. However, the second of the omini is the most formidable. It is damned frightening if you're opposing it. It is the second swallow-up of the first, according to the Jewish prophet Isaiah, who says, "And on this mountain he shall make unto all people a feast of fat things. And he will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death in victory, and he will personally wipe away tears off all faces. And the rebuke of his people shall he take away from off all the earth. For he hath spoken it." Imagine a will born of a deathless soul, which both knows it cannot die and actually cannot die. That will, born of the virgin soul, carrying both seed and womb in one, is incorruptible. It cannot be like Achilles, only a half god. It must be either fully material or fully transcendent, or somehow both. His formidability shall swallow up even death itself, as a king sits down to feast. The deathless soul, daughter of the deathless will present itself in various ways. And because she is unconquerable, she must also be wise. The foolish will ends up making trouble for itself and causes itself to expend energy uselessness because it is aimed in the wrong direction. That is the will in its freedom of youth, but not a deathless will. A deathless will, however, will be efficient. It will be directional in its pursuit. Because it is directional, we know it must be free to choose both its journey and its goals. Its goals always true and right, never second guessing. Because change implies inefficiency. Therefore, the preeminent will of the second order must logically be wise, eternal, effective, directional, and free. The deathless will must be freely willing, if it is to be. The preeminent will of the second order, which is still eternal, wise, effective, and free, is also satisfying, perhaps even complete. Yet we shouldn't be so certain, not yet. Remember, we said that changes imply inefficiency of movement, but it is not inefficient if that movement is on to something better and higher. Even if that movement is merely in an approximal direction because the destination is unknown, we sense it's there. Intuiting the direction outranks knowledge of the direction, for knowledge requires education by an outside source, and that which is eternal needs no advice from that which is dying. Divine intuition supersedes factual knowing. What is there but something beyond the eternally long duration of the will? You shall either lose all or give all away. Therein Lewis again lays down the very paradox. The paradox of all paradoxes. Nothing you have not yet given away will ever really be yours. That what you really want to keep has to be given away if you're to keep it. If you want love, you must love. If you want peace, you must be peaceful amid struggle. You must reflect and sacrifice what you most need in order to keep it. Anything you hold too tightly is strangled. It is strangled because it is cut off from oxygen by our desire to retain it, like a one-of-a-kind orchid hidden for safety in the darkness of a closet. We cannot thrive if we are too safe from the sun's glory. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. He who loves his life will lose it, and he who gives his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. And here, we arrive at Dante, that Italian poet who forced the Florentine Italian to supersede Roman and Latin by sheer will, and in the end, he upended the liturgical and the linguistical hierarchy of regions, of religions, of nations, and civilization itself. Power arriving through beauty. In Canto 5 as Paradiso, his conversation with Beatrice comes to the conclusion that all of life should be taken seriously. The most serious of the vows is the monastic vow. He condemns the rash vows of Agamemnon and Jephthah, who both sacrificed daughters for success in war. Then Dante more than condemns another class of vows which are even more evil than those rash vows ending in the murder of their beloved innocents. He condemns our light vows, those vows we take lightly, which are taken against an irreverence of the most sacred gift, our free will. And now you see we've come back full circle, back to the deathless will. Yet Dante holds the will up to a higher standard, one deserving our sacred awe. And what he says next shocks us to our very core. In a religious vow, particularly in the monastic vow, the will gives up the will as the victim's life is laid down on the altar. And the will cannot will itself back to itself. The will cannot will itself back to itself. It's the unalterable sacrifice of the eternal to something greater, higher than mere eternal platonics. The meaning of the material is here being given away, not just the material alone. Material is but the shadow of meaning, meaning shadowing material into existence. The will then must be taken up into something greater. In an irreversible union, it will become that which can never be on its own. The eternal, the fully fourth dimensional, transcended by the infinite, not only in time, but also infinite in the infinitely dimensional boundlessness of being. For what good would it be to live forever unless that life is directed at the forever unsurpassable? The unalterable sacrifice of the eternal will to something preeminent is indeed the next evolution of mankind. Your will transcending, the joining of the deathless with the greatest possible goodness forever, irrevocably fused. You see, the monastics, they created the universities. This is a fact. Universities, when turning away from their conservative origin, they commit suicide. Even eternal institutions never umbilically sever from their source of power and survive. Those simple monks knew something about knowledge and truth, as even the first collegiate architecture still attests. Dante's assertion that we lay down our wills on an altar of sacrifice harkens back to the Iphigenian sacrifice. Anything worth keeping is worth sacrificing. Nothing not worth keeping is worthy of offering. My friends, we must make the crawl. We must crawl, bleeding hands and knees, onto the altar of the gods. If Agamemnon had not surrendered his will to Artemis, the Greeks would have been dashed upon the rocks before landing the Trojan shores. Had Child not laid down her will, she would not have been able to obey her father and king. And as anyone who has slaughtered animals for a meal knows, you can taste the stress in an animal who knows the bullet's bound. They'll even shed their weight, as surely the huntress goddess knew. A worthy sacrifice must be whole. The only unstressed sacrifice is the willing. The most proper sacrifice, the one bowing in sorrowful joy. And once the will is surrendered on the altar, willingly and finally, the unimaginable manifests. For the undying eternal will dies of its own volition. Only itself can allow itself to die. The altar is what determines the outcome of the gift. Yet the directionality of the gift is what matters. Your why must be pointed somewhere. The will cannot will itself back to itself. That eternal will has willingly given up its desires and its future. In a moment of utmost clarity and poise, its revelation is most true. The nobility of the revelation of truth comes like the shimmer of summer. A fleeting moment, a divine revelation, meeting the flaming willingness to act. For to act in the highest, truest, and most noble sense is to direct yourself towards the landscape of truth himself. Truth, not always apparent, must be leapt at. It cannot be safely approached if you want to apprehend and to unite. To mount the highest possible altar stone necessitates a leap, both dangerous and good. Only the will can lay itself down eternally, forever pointing itself rightly. And it does so not because it's not wise, but because it is. Rebels cannot be trusted, for every other sacrifice may be taken back off the altar, bringing our curse. Only the wise will not will itself back to itself. This Iphigenian offering was accepted because it was a living sacrifice. For only a living sacrifice may be acceptable and useful for a binding high value. A vow, merely a promise-paired sacrifice. The higher the promise, the more costly the sacrifice, the more the vow. Meaningless vows vocalize diminished value. Valueless vocalizations decline into desperation. When you listen to Maurice Andreev's heptate for trumpet and percussion, item 5, it sings of this truth. For the trumpet's half-valving slides meander like our vows, before finding the greater discordant structure in the 6 sempre stringito. The trill, equally played in length and volume, yet one ever root with the other merely flourish. You cannot make two vows. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll love the one and hate the other. One will be your root, and all others your mere flourish, as with the trill. And so you will only make one vow, and it will be made with your very life. From the value of your life, the performance of all other vows cascades. Your primary vow shall beget your lower covenants. When one lower covenant breaks, the others may still stand. But when the vow cracks, all covenants shatter. For the highest vow binds your very identity. Only the will may suffice for an eternally bound vow. For every other sacrifice may be taken back off the altar. Only the will cannot will itself back to itself now. And a gift that's ungiven becomes a curse. The uplifting of the God inverts the damnation by that very God. And so the only holy gift is the one which remains wholly given. The only acceptable gift, that which strips away your very power to remove it. And if the soul is deathless, so ought be the vow. If love is eternal, so too the freeing will which makes love, love. Our values cascade from the top of the hierarchy and into the daily determinations of our very lives. You may stray, but you will always return. You may wonder, but you will always action what you are. The high rejoinder to unite. Whose altar determines whose gift? The firelit hewn hall of covenant sheltering the forbidden glance, part justified in an altar of the same hewing consumed in flame. Like mindless seers with doves, we test the gods that we offer the lesser. Proper gift sets your life in proper order. Had Calchas, the seer, actually seen, he would not have contaminated the altar with Lord blood. It's blind leading the blind. Doves of peace inappropriately slain to that huntress of war, delaying the inevitable. The king of war crossed the Aegean, delayed a decade at the siege, for his prideful bickering. Achilles' greatest strength and source of power, stricken by Paris' erroneous arrow, necessary that his source of feigning turn to downfall, both literally, figuratively. The point of pride met with the point tip of the fates. In delay, lie made true. For if two shall become one flesh, fate deemed, shall Achilles die with Iphigenia too. You shall bear the treacheries of he whom you serve, debt of the master always borne by slave undeserved. Agamemnon slayed the Trojans, blood fixed in the streets, mixed with the blood of the God-man, who they said could not bleed. The entirety of Grecian men departed from their Bathshebian homes for a decade. They missed a generation that never grown, were like King David, only the coward's bastards are ever born. Victory comes from loss of the generation sacrificed. For it was necessary that the war goddess taste the blood not only of the innocent lamb, but the Lion King's robe is soaked in his child's blood. The prided King of Kings makes a rash vow. His child willingly dies for his people, overcome with disastrous cost. But what if a stronger stead humbled with true vow? What might he overcome through his pure sacrifice? What if that blood-soaked robe is instead rolled up and burned, feeding the fire of cosmic justice and therein made firm? Yet, Trojan remnant remained, wombed by Agamemnon's escaped and disgraced Trojan whore, found at the Prince of Cities the very next morn, ennobled by its sacrificed prince's name, man who killed the God-man, writing death only after he is slain. The first Parisian, as your will, is offspring of the deathless soul, transcends time in all ill fame. Paris's wrought iron tower still shining over Spartan silence. His city of light living eternally only through his death. Creating a people of an eternal refuge, a lighted bridge overnight. Real kingdom overcoming the doomed darkness of deception and pride. You shall only bear the glory of the cascading vow that you live. Only through dying is fruitful glory formed. Disgraced womb, setting a holy and eternal feast. The truer wooden horse hides the light of the morn. And our peace means the deafening death of our every defeat. Hope you enjoyed this essay. rickwalker.com if you want more. I would very much appreciate a like and a subscribe. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.